Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we're going to take a look at what the spooks from the darkest hour really are. One of the most delightfully bizarre concepts that science fiction cinema has thrown in our faces is this: creatures made of pure electricity, as if someone decided to turn lightning into a pet and release it on Earth without an instruction manual. I'm talking, of course, about those crackling beings that parade through the darkest hour. These interdimensional intruders arrive uninvited, with all the elegance of a blackout in the middle of a party, and they radiate the vibe of having been assembled out of raw voltage, galactic bad temper, and zero patience for dealing with humans. Everything starts with power outages that people blame on the usual failures in the electrical grid, because, come on, in any big city that's as normal as traffic. But soon it becomes clear this isn't a simple wiring problem. There's something out there, and it's hungry. Every time one of these energy specters appears, it turns whoever it touches into dust. Basically a low-budget Thanos snap, making them perfect enemies for an alien disaster storyline. And because these creatures are so strange, unpredictable, and deliciously bewildering, I decided to take them apart piece by piece for this video. Their origins, their hidden lore, their impossible biology, their absurd strength, and of course, that Achilles heel that no superhuman creature is complete without. The plot follows Ben and Sean, two young Americans who land in Russia to pitch a social media app. The trip promised business, adventure, and maybe a cool photo with a Soviet building in the background, until the cataclysm hits during a Moscow night out. Amid lights, music, and drinks, the electric aliens make their spectacular debut. In minutes, Moscow goes from a vibrant city to a glowing ruin. People disintegrate just by crossing their path. The police are useless. The military won't even get close. The city collapses like a house of cards in an electrical storm. Our protagonists survive the first attack and barricade themselves inside their building. But hunger is the silent villain that always wins, so sooner or later, they go out. From there we follow Ben, Sean, their friend Skylar, and the girls they met that same night, Natalie and N, as they try to figure out what the hell is happening and how to avoid becoming instant charcoal in front of these electric ghosts, a nickname that, frankly, sells them so short it's funny. The aliens' arrival is so absurd that at first many people think it's some kind of weird aurora borealis. The sky lights up with yellow and orange waves that look nothing like any aurora you've seen on Google. It's as if someone hacked the atmosphere and changed its filter. But soon the truth is revealed. Those lights are floating energy spheres, glowing like suspended embers. The nightmare officially begins when those spheres touch the ground and poof, vanish. Literally, invisible. From that moment on, they move around devouring any form of life. Their menu includes humans, animals, plants, anything. The only way to detect them is to pay attention to electrical devices, flickering lights, appliances turning on by themselves, sudden buzzing sounds. In super brief attacks, the creature appears for mere milliseconds, like a glitch in the universe. When they do manage to show themselves, their appearance is a visual puzzle, a glowing core surrounded by a humanoid figure made of conductive minerals that spin, vibrate, and spark non-stop. Imagine an electric vortex mixed with a liquid metal giant. And when they get agitated, the core lights up a humanoid face in incandescent orange, with expressions that seem to come more from instinct than conscious thought. If you expose their energy to microwaves, their bodies wobble and lose shape for a few seconds, as if you were unplugging the software that keeps their structure together. In those moments, their face becomes more visible. Even so, the movie never gives us a full, clear view, just glimpses. The closest we get is during the final battle. From the moment they arrive, they cause blackouts that plunge the city into chaos. Then they begin consuming life indiscriminately. This has given rise to an interesting fan theory. Maybe this isn't a military invasion, but a migration. Why? They show no signs of organization, tactics, or communication. They just act. Like predators. Like visitors landing on an unknown planet in search of resources. And if you analyze their behavior, the theory fits. They don't distinguish between categories of living beings. To them, anything that breathes is portable energy. But that doesn't make them classic villains. They're more like animals that found an interplanetary buffet. Earth is their favorite supermarket. Of course, not everything is basic instinct. There are scenes where they seem to act with intention. One of the clearest examples happens when the protagonists hide in Sergei's house, along with his cat. From the window, an alien detects the group and tries to break in as if collecting an overdue payment. It chases them, tracks them, and ultimately confronts the Russian survivors who manage to destroy it. In the climax of the movie, when it seems like nothing else could possibly increase the tension, a sequence arrives that literally forces you to grab onto your seat. Sean and Natalie, exhausted, take refuge inside an abandoned bus with the naive hope that they've finally found a safe corner to catch their breath. The silence inside the vehicle is almost comforting, but it lasts less than a phone battery on low power mode. Suddenly, a vibration runs through the metal frame, a faint hum, like the prelude to an electrical storm. Before they can even process what's happening, a luminous entity materializes at the entrance of the bus, slipping inside with a disturbing ease, as if the structure weren't even there. The moment it crosses the threshold, the bus's electrical system, until that moment deader than a 90s television, comes to life in an instant. Flickering lights, sparking cables, panels lighting up on their own. It's as if the creature were capable of turning a rundown vehicle into an improvised power plant. And that's when the nightmare begins. The monster lunges at them with a nearly instinctive aggression, like a predator that has just smelled blood. One of its tentacles, formed from pure vibrating energy, stretches out and grabs Natalie, wrapping around her like a marked prey. It holds her without visibly injuring her, but with a strength that makes it clear it only needs a little push to disintegrate her. Sean panics, but also switches into express hero mode. No weapons, no plan, just adrenaline as fuel. He throws himself toward her, struggles against the creature's glowing arm, and after a desperate tug-of-war in which he almost loses his footing, he manages to free her from that electric prison. However, the victory lasts only a blink. The entity reconfigures itself, its lights flickering as though irritated by the challenge, and it lunges at them again. More violently, faster, almost offended by the interruption. Sean, desperate, stumbles upon a strange fragment lying on the floor. A piece broken off from the alien itself, a still sparking residue that pulses like an external heart. Without thinking twice, because thinking would mean dying, he grabs the fragment and throws it directly at the creature's energy core. The impact produces a pulse of light so intense that it floods the entire bus, and within seconds the creature enters a state of collapse, imploding in a silent yet blinding explosion. After that brutal confrontation, something becomes clear, something the movie has hinted at since its earliest scenes. These entities not only represent an extreme danger, but they also seem incapable of behaving in any way other than attacking. Even so, the film leaves an unsettling possibility open. Are they inherently hostile beings? Or just biological machines reacting to stimuli they don't understand? There are no speeches, no signs of reasoning, not even gestures that suggest curiosity about humans. Nothing. They are pure reaction, pure instinct, a species that seems to exist solely to consume energy and advance. And still, the lack of apparent intention doesn't make their arrival any less terrifying. From the very first moment they appear, they fall from the sky like a rain of living lights, illuminating the firmament with a spectacle that if it weren't deadly, would be almost beautiful. Their bodies are clearly visible during their descent, coated in such an intense electrical charge that they shine like fragments of falling stars. But that glow is short-lived. As soon as they touch the ground, part of that energy is released in a shockwave, and as if someone flipped a celestial switch, they become completely invisible to the human eye. That transition, from dazzling beings to invisible predators, is what makes their presence a true nightmare. Once on the ground, they act with no apparent coordination, no formations, no leaders, nothing that resembles a military organization. They simply move forward, consuming every form of energy within their reach. Electricity, heat, even the bioelectricity of living beings. But this behavior generates a devastating side effect. Their passage causes massive blackouts, overloads in urban grids, structural failures, and bursts of electromagnetic pulses that plunge entire cities into darkness. For humans, all of this is interpreted as a systematic attack, as if a perfectly planned invasion force were dismantling civilization. However, from a scientific perspective, it might just be an inevitable byproduct of their nature, an involuntary consequence of existing in a world not built to withstand them. Fans of the movie have given them all sorts of nicknames: phantoms, spooks, electrospecters, and they're not wrong. Their abilities border on the inhuman. Their absolute invisibility turns them into hunters that cannot be anticipated. Their protective field, a kind of electromagnetic shield, pulverizes any conventional weapon before it can pose a real threat. And the way they move, floating effortlessly, gliding as if the air were their natural habitat, makes them perfect predators. They are fast, silent, lethal, and seem to move with an efficiency that would make any known creature pale in comparison. These creatures possess an ability so unsettling it feels like something pulled straight out of a nightmare designed by a mad engineer. They can materialize limbs made entirely of living energy, appendages that glow with an almost hypnotic radiance and stretch like intelligent whips, moving with a precision reminiscent of trained serpents. These luminous arms don't just appear and vanish. They unfurl in multiple directions as if they had minds of their own, capable of reacting to a victim's movement even before the victim realizes they're being hunted. Once one of these tentacles reaches its target, it wraps around them with superhuman speed, squeezing with an intensity that makes it clear there is no possible escape. In a matter of seconds, the prey is dragged toward the entity's burning center, a brilliant core that pulses like a stellar furnace ready to devour anything that touches it. There, the body disintegrates instantly, reduced to particles that scatter like ash suspended in the air. What's most unsettling is that these tentacles don't cause visible wounds when they touch the skin. They don't burn, pierce, or tear. Their purpose isn't to injure, but to hold. They feel strangely cold, even cushioned, yet their strength is so overwhelming that escape is impossible. All they do is guide the victim toward the incandescent heart where the real destruction takes place. They don't need physical violence. Their entire strategy is to capture, consume, and move forward. That trait alone makes them entities capable of wiping out entire populations without the need for direct attacks. They don't discriminate between humans, animals, or even plants. To them, any form of life is merely available energy, a fuel source to sustain their endless existence. If an organism breathes, vibrates, or generates any kind of biological activity, it's already on the menu. Their method of perceiving the world is just as terrifying. These so-called spooks identify living beings by tracking the body's natural electrical signals. They detect brain impulses, muscle contractions, the quickened beat of a heart, even the faintest nervous activity. And if that weren't alarming enough, they possess a type of perception that functions similarly to X-ray vision. They can see through walls, doors, cars, layers of concrete, and entire structures, distinguishing the internal heat of an organism or the electrical vibrations within tissues. Millimeters of steel or cement pose no barrier at all, although they can fire concentrated bursts of energy, similar to compressed electrical discharges. They rarely use this ability. Firing these rays drains vital energy, and for a creature that must constantly absorb to survive, every attack is an expense they prefer to avoid. Their most efficient killing method is always the same: capture and devour. But despite all these terrifying strengths, the electric phantoms are not invincible. In fact, the irony is that their greatest weakness is so simple it sounds like a joke. They cannot detect anything behind glass. A window, a transparent panel, a storefront display, or even a car windshield acts as an illusory wall for them. A human could be inches away, and the spook would have no idea there is life there. And to top it off, some insulating materials, like plastic, partially block their electrical perception, becoming extremely effective hiding spots that, for humans, feel hilariously simple. Throughout the story, survivors discover an even more important weak point: microwaves. When these beings are exposed to this type of radiation, the energy shield surrounding them, a protective field that disintegrates any physical object before it can reach their actual body, breaks down as if struck directly. The barrier falls, their vibrating structure loses cohesion, and without that protection, the spooks become incredibly fragile. A simple bullet, a blunt strike, or even ordinary fire is enough to reduce them to nothing. Flames, in particular, are devastating. They consume the energy that gives them form and annihilate them within seconds. Another surprising, almost absurd vulnerability is their reaction to the remains of one of their own. If a spook comes into contact with fragments or particles left behind by another that has already died, its body begins to destabilize immediately. It loses the ability to float, its light-based structure flickers as if it's shutting down, and it finally collapses. It's as if they were designed to self-destruct in the presence of dead material from their own species. Electronic devices also become involuntary allies in detecting their presence. Lights flickering for no reason, bulbs turning on and off by themselves, televisions emitting static, fans coming alive while unplugged, appliances vibrating as if drawn by an invisible magnet. All of these phenomena occur when a spook is nearby. Although these entities rarely fall into traps, intense light or sudden explosions can disorient them for an instant, just long enough to allow a desperate escape. A camera flash, a strong spark, or even an unexpected flare can briefly divert them from their target. As for their motivation, everything indicates they don't come to Earth out of whim or direct hostility toward humans. Their true objective appears to be linked to their obsessive need to extract specific minerals, compounds they consider essential to maintaining their energetic structure. It is this deficiency, this hunger for minerals, that drives them to travel between worlds. Our planet, rich in those components, becomes for them a true geological feast, and for us, a stage for desperate survival. It is believed that the primary purpose of these beings was not simply to invade or conquer, but to fulfill an almost mechanical function, collecting minerals with conductive properties that were vital for their own existence. Everything suggests that the structure of their bodies is composed, for the most part, of the very same elements they seek. They are organisms made of pure energy, supported by mineral particles that act as scaffolding, each one essentially a living battery powered by specific substances. This detail is hinted at several times throughout the film, but it becomes clearer when we observe how these entities construct gigantic structures rising over different points in Moscow. They look like towers, but they aren't. They're energy extractors, colossal devices whose sole purpose is to absorb from the ground high concentrations of minerals that, on screen, appear as dense masses of vibrant light. The police officers accompanying the protagonists reveal at various moments that these creatures don't just erect these structures in one specific area. They replicate the process across multiple sectors of the city, distributing the extraction as if they were following an invisible geological map humans cannot perceive. The repetition of this construction pattern suggests they act according to a programmed instinct, a mission that requires no communication, hierarchy, or military strategy. They simply arrive, detect the resources, extract them, and move on. Among fans of the film, a theory quickly emerged and gained notable popularity. Once these beings completed the mineral harvest, they would leave Earth without further conflict, traveling to another planet with similar conditions to repeat the same process. They would be something like cosmic miners, destined to travel through galaxies consuming essential resources needed to sustain their energetic form. They wouldn't come to destroy human civilization out of malice. Rather, the destruction would be an inevitable side effect of what they consider a simple biological routine. Interestingly, the project's original idea tried to explain their arrival differently. The Spooks were going to enter Earth trapped inside meteor fragments, like extraterrestrial seeds released upon impact. But this concept was ultimately discarded. The director preferred a more memorable arrival, something visually striking for the audience. That's why they chose to present them as cascades of light falling from the sky, a spectacle so extraordinary that it immediately captures the attention of both the characters and the viewers. In the early creative stages, before establishing their final appearance, the team even considered giving these aliens a completely different form from what ended up on screen. The first draft suggested creatures resembling enormous cephalopods with multiple tentacles, amorphous bodies, and several eyes arranged irregularly. This aesthetic strongly resembled the invaders from Skyline, another extraterrestrial-themed movie being developed around that time. Dimitri Chaffee, the concept artist responsible for bringing these beings to life visually, explained that the early sketches were more experimental than practical. Since the initial script didn't mention invisibility, the designs ranged from completely grotesque monsters to entities inspired by the cosmic horror of H.P. Lovecraft. There were creatures with impossible shapes, twisted bodies, seemingly violating the laws of biology, floating heads with deformed proportions, faceless beings, and others surrounded by halos of light that suggested a purely energetic composition. The original intention was to represent creatures so bizarre that they would appear incomprehensible to the human mind. Director Chris Gorak mentioned in interviews that his goal was to introduce something never before seen in alien invasion films. He didn't want traditional creatures made of flesh or metal. He wanted entities composed entirely of energy, capable of bending and manipulating it as if it were living tissue. The idea was that their mere presence would communicate danger. Bodies so bright and unstable, they looked as though they could expand, explode, or absorb their surroundings at any moment. However, at a certain point during production, Gorak decided to abandon the tentacled direction because he felt the monsters looked too similar to other oceanic-like creatures already familiar in the genre. He sought something more symbolic, a figure that vaguely suggested human anatomy but was clearly not human. Therefore, he opted for a design wrapped in circles of energy and luminous lines that gave the impression of a suspended, shifting body, a kind of electric shadow shaped like a humanoid. Regarding the film's overall tone, Gorak admitted that his greatest influence was 28 Days Later. He wanted to capture the sensation of a city that had already collapsed, where the worst had taken place before the movie even begins. This approach explains the abundance of panoramic shots showing a practically dead Moscow, empty streets, destroyed buildings, abandoned vehicles, and an oppressive silence. The atmosphere doesn't aim to portray the invasion in real time, but rather its aftermath. In fact, the unpredictable speed of the spooks and their erratic behavior draw direct inspiration from the brutal intensity of the infected in that film. Chaffee revealed that during pre-production, around 50 different concepts for the creatures were developed. There were not only octopus-inspired options, but also giant spider-like forms, demonic figures, microorganism-based designs scaled to monstrous proportions, and beings inspired by classics of fantasy and horror cinema. Many of these designs included various tentacles or appendages because the artists felt they added a more dynamic and threatening appearance. One striking detail is that the script never clearly specified what the aliens should look like, how their protective field worked, or how they became invisible. The only concrete instruction was that they had to be beings made of pure energy, and that this energy needed to feel unstable, dangerous, and difficult to understand. That was the real challenge for the visual effects team, creating something that looked impossible but still believable within the film's context. Finally, the definitive design was developed by the French Studio BUF, specialists in visual effects, although Chaffee continued contributing as a conceptual supervisor. This was because executive producer Timur Bekmambetov, known for his distinctive visual style, had a very precise aesthetic vision for how the film should look. He was also the one who insisted on setting the story in Russia, a decision that broke with the typical trend of placing these narratives in the United States or the United Kingdom. Despite all the effort, dedication, and ambition behind the project, when the film premiered in 2011, it was met with overwhelmingly negative reviews. Most criticisms pointed to a weak script marked by predictable narrative choices and unmemorable characters. Even though John Spates, an experienced sci-fi writer and collaborator of Ridley Scott on Prometheus, was responsible for the original story, many argued that the film lacked emotional depth and innovative ideas within the genre. The visual concept was striking, yes, but the narrative failed to sustain it.